Hi, Miss EJ's kids. We are almost done with Betsy-Tacy. We've got chapter 13 and chapter 14 left. I'm really excited. So right now we're going to do chapter 13, Mrs. Muller Comes to Call. I'm ready for it. I hope you are. Soon after baby Margaret was born, two things happened to Betsy and Tacy. The first one was they climbed the big hill all the way to the White House, which stood on the top. The second one was, well, that comes after the first. It was a late summer day. Goldenrod and asters were coloring the hill. The days were growing short, the birds were gathering in flocks, and there was a feeling in the air that school would be starting soon. Betsy and Tacy were sitting in the backyard maple, and suddenly Betsy said, "Let's climb the big hill all the way to the top." "Let's," Tacy said. So they ran and asked their mothers. "All right," said Betsy's mother, "but you'd better take a picnic." "All right," said Tacy's mother. "What a good thing it is that I was just baking a cake." So they took along a picnic. This was the first time they had taken a picnic in a basket. They packed their picnic in a brown wicker basket, and they both took hold of the handle, and they climbed the big hill. They climbed to the ridge where wild roses grew in June. They had gone that far before. They passed the tree where they had left the egg for bee in a nest at the very top. They passed the thorn apple tree where they had planned to make a house. There was a pasture on one side, and a cow and calf were in the pasture. On the other side, the country was open and free. They turned to look back there, but they kept on climbing. They climbed and they climbed, and they came to the top of the hill. The land was as flat as a plate, and there were oak trees scattered about, and the White House stood there, the one the sun came up behind in the morning. They went to the White House, and they peeked all around it. They almost expected to find the sun in a pocket behind the house, but there was only a deep ravine, with the sound of water gurgling, and another hill beyond. "Goodness," said Betsy, "the world is big." They had thought they would be satisfied once they had climbed the big hill. But now they wanted to go down into the ravine and see this water which sounded so merry and climb the next hill. "We will someday too," Betsy said. But they thought that for one day they had done enough. So they sat down on the rim of the big hill and ate their lunch. They sat on the rim overlooking Hill Street, and they could look down along the road they had come, into the maples of Hill Street and down on the roofs of their homes. They could see the trees in the vacant lot. They could see the tower of the chocolate-colored house. They could see the red brick schoolhouse where they went to school. And they could see farther than that, for they could see down to Front Street, where Tacy's father had his office and Betsy's father had his store. They could see the towering chimneys of the big mill where the whistles blew for morning, noon, and night. They could see Page Park with the white fence around it. And beyond that, down in the valley, they could see a silver ribbon. They knew that was the river. "Mercy," said Tacy, "there are a lot of places to go." They had their sandwiches and the cake Tacy's mother had made and started down the hill. And when they reached Betsy's house, a great surprise awaited them. Betsy's mother was sitting on the porch rocking the baby. She was laughing, and she looked very young and pretty, with her red hair, like Tacy's, flying around her face and the baby in her arms. "You two little rascals, come here," she said. Betsy and Tacy came. "Do you remember the day I let you take my card case?" Betsy's mother asked. Betsy and Tacy nodded. Of course they remembered. "Well, what do you mean by leaving my cars at strange houses?" "Strange houses?" asked Betsy. "The houses of people we don't know." As Betsy and Tacy did not answer, she went on. "You must have left a card at that big new house on the corner of Pleasant Street." "Why, yes," said Betsy, "we did." But she wondered how her mother knew. She and Tacy had kept that visit a secret. "The people had gone away," Tacy said, but she didn't say where. "Well, here's what happened," said Mrs. Ray, still laughing, and Julia and Katie, who were standing by the porch, laughed too. "This afternoon I was sitting here on the porch, and a carriage drove up. A lady got out, and she came up the steps of the porch and said, 'Mrs. Ray, I am Mrs. Muller, and it was so kind of you to call.' And then she explained that she and her husband had moved here from Milwaukee. They had bought that house and settled in it," she said, "and then had to go back to Milwaukee. But now they have come here to stay and get their little girl in the school." "Their little girl!" cried Betsy and Tacy together. "Is there a little girl?" "Of course. Didn't I tell you that the little girl was with her? Julie and Katie entertained her, for I couldn't find you two. But she's just about your age." "What's she like?" asked Betsy and Tacy breathlessly. "Oh, she's darling," said Julia and Katie. "She's perfectly sweet." "She has little yellow curls," said Julia, "short ones like this." "And big blue eyes," said Katie. "She wore the prettiest dress," said Julia, "white lace with bows of blue ribbon all over." "And she dances," said Katie. "She danced for us all by herself." Betsy and Tacy looked at each other. "What's her name?" asked Betsy. "Her name is Tib. It's short for Thelma," Julia and Katie explained. "Tib." Betsy and Tacy didn't say a word. They started down Hill Street. Do you suppose we'll like her? They asked, but silently. Down their hearts, they thought they wouldn't. They took hold of hands when they reached the vacant lot. They walked as though they were walking into danger. The tall trees and the bushes and the brush seemed to wait in breathless excitement as Betsy and Tacy approached the chocolate-colored house. I think we're just going to go into chapter 14 because that's an awful cliffhanger. That's awful of me. So chapter 14 is called Tib. They approached the chocolate-colored house from the rear, for it faced on Pleasant Street. On the back lawn, there was an oak tree which stood on a small knoll. On the knoll, they saw what looked like a clothespin standing prongs up. It was a little girl standing on her head. She righted herself when they came near and stood on her bare feet. She was dainty and small. Her arms, legs, and face were tanned, which made her blue eyes look even bluer than they were, and her short fluff of yellow hair looked very yellow. She stared at them silently out of her round blue eyes. "What were you doing?" asked Betsy. "Standing on my head." "What were you doing that for?" "I was practicing." "It must be hard," said Betsy. "Oh, no, it isn't." The little girl looked surprised. Tacy didn't say a word. She was bashful. Betsy stared back at the little girl. It was certainly Tib. "But my sister said you had a white lace dress on," she said at last. "I took it off when I came home," Tib answered. "I'm not allowed to play in my best dress." "Neither am I," said Betsy. "Neither is Tacy. I wish we could see your dress, though," she added after a moment. "Do you?" asked Tib, looking surprised again. "I'll show it to you." She led the way into the chocolate-colored house. They went in by the back door. "Wipe your feet," said Tib, pausing on the doormat. The kitchen was so clean, it shone like a polished pan. It smelled good, of something baking. A hired girl was standing by the stove. There was a swinging door which led to the dining room, and another door which led to a pantry full of glittery china and glass. The third door led up the narrow stairs, and up these stairs they followed Tib. Upstairs was a long hall with doors admitting to the bedrooms. Tib took them into one of these, and hanging in a closet was the white lace dress. "It's a beautiful dress," said Betsy. Tacy touched one of the pale blue satin bows. It's a huge one. Tib led them down the hall. There were front stairs as well as back stairs. They went down the front stairs, and just as the steps turned into a landing, they came in view of the pane of colored glass. Afternoon sunlight streaming through it turned it to a ruby red. "Tacy and I like that colored glass," said Betsy. "What colored glass?" asked Tib. "That colored glass over your door." "Do you?" "Why?" asked Tib. She looked as if she had never noticed it before. "We like your tower, too," said Betsy. "What tower?" asked Tib. "Do you mean the round room? That's our front parlor." They crossed the hall and entered it. It was round and beautiful. Hanging over the piano was a picture of an old man giving a little girl a music lesson. The chairs and sofa were covered with blue velvet, and there was a bamboo table draped with a blue silk scarf. The table had two little china dolls, a shepherd and a shepherdess. Tib led them through the blue velvet curtains into the back parlor. This had a window seat from which you could see the red brick schoolhouse. A lady sat there sewing. She was short and chunky and had yellow hair like Tib's and earrings in her ears. "Is this the little Ray girl?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," answered Betsy. "I'm Betsy, and this is Tacy." Tacy held her head down and covered her face with her curls. "Well, I hope you children will all be great friends," Tib's mother said, smiling. "Mamma," said Tib, "may we have some coffee cake?" "Yes," said the lady. "Matilda will give you some, but eat it out on the knoll." So Matilda, she was the hired girl, gave them some coffee cake. It was hot out of the oven, and they sat down to eat it on the knoll. Tib kept staring at Betsy and Tacy with her round blue eyes. She looked awed and admiring, which was nice but very strange. For Tib was the one who danced, thought Betsy. She was the one who had the white lace dress. She was the one who had a house with front and back stairs, and a tower, and a pane of colored glass. Betsy and Tacy looked at each other. Both of them looked surprised. They hadn't expected to like her, but they did. Tib didn't say a word, and neither did Tacy. So at last, Betsy said, "When you came to our house, we were up on the big hill." "Were you?" asked Tib. "We climbed to the very top," said Betsy. "Did you?" Tib replied. "There's a little hill, too," said Betsy, "with a bench on it. We eat our supper there." "All by yourselves?" asked Tib. "All by ourselves," said Betsy. "And Betsy makes up stories," said Tacy. It was the first word she had said. "Do you mean," asked Tib, "that she tells about Cinderella?" "No, I make them up," said Betsy. But how can you? Tib asked. Why, I just do, said Betsy. Tacy helps me. Will you make one up now? Asked Tib. Yes, if you want me to. I'll make one up about you and me and Tacy and that pane of colored glass over your door. Tib was speechless with astonishment, but Tacy jumped to her feet and said, Let's go up to our bench. That's the best place for stories. So she took one of Tib's hands, and Betsy took the other, and they walked through the vacant lot and up Hill Street Hill. As they walked, they were very busy talking. We've got a piano box we play in, Betsy said. And Betsy's got a baby sister, Tacy said. We play paper dolls, said Betsy. And stores, said Tacy. We dress up and go calling, and Betsy makes up games. Tib held her hands tightly. She sighed deeply with content. I'm glad we came here, she said. I like this better than Milwaukee. Betsy and Tacy stopped still. They looked at each other, their eyes as round as Tib's. She liked Hill Street better than Milwaukee. Well, they had always known it was nice. After a silent moment, they went slowly toward the bench on the hill. We'll have lots of fun, said Betsy. You and me and Tacy. Lots of things will happen. And so they did. The end. Oh. After this book, there's, I think, 3 more Betsy-Tacy stories. And all of them have Tib in them. I never had them, though. So maybe you'll have to find them. Or maybe I'll have to find them at the library. But I hope you guys enjoyed Betsy-Tacy by Hart, Lovelace. And I hope you guys enjoy your day. Good night to CJ's kids.